You all to Couch Conversations. Good evening, good evening, good evening. I'd like to welcome you all to Couch Conversations. This was the gift to the community from Representative Davis during the COVID pandemic, and it's continued since then. And we're hoping that we'll have the opportunity to answer some of your questions about public health issues that are pressing this week. I'm a retired physician. I worked for 30 years in the western suburbs and then joined the congressman in his office. And it was a very eye opening experience. I learned a lot about public health and public service. So it's a real honor to be here on this panel with Dr. Mason and Joseph Harrington and the congressman. Dr. Mason, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm a Chicago native for the most part. I wasn't born here, but all the life I know, I've lived in Chicago. Totally educated in the city of Chicago. High school, college at Loyola University, med school, University of Illinois, surgery training at Michael Reese and Mercy Hospitals, and practiced in Chicago for some time. Was blessed to have an opportunity to work in the public space as Commissioner of Health for the City of Chicago and as the Director of the Chief Executive Officer for the County Health and Hospital System for a short period of time. So it's been a very, very full life, and having an opportunity to see these different problems from different perspectives as these opportunities that I've just mentioned allowed me to participate in. I learned a lot from both the people who had to provide the service as well as those who needed the service provided. Happy to answer any questions that you have. Doug, that'll take that as my introduction for night for tonight. Oh, one last thing. I should say I am one of 10 children. So that was also an interesting thing that living in the city of Chicago was like. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Harrington.
Well, thank you, Doug. My name is Joe Harrington. I'm not going to say I'm a native Chicago because the indigenous people were the the original natives to this city. But I was born and raised in Chicago on the south side in Woodlawn. Actually, I met Congressman Davis in 1975 when I was working on the city of Chicago at St. Francis Cabrini School, and I was managing a federal program in the school. And I called up one of my best friend's wives, Dr. James, and was talking to her. She said, "You need to come and meet my boss. That's Danny Davis." So I left work and went over, and that's how I met Congressman Davis. But in terms of my career, born, raised, educated in the city of Chicago, proud graduate of Chicago State University. Also participated in a 2-year fellowship out of the University of Illinois around international health leadership development. My work has been mostly in public health and healthcare. I worked at 3 different hospitals and worked at the city health department 3 times and retired from the state health department in 2027, where I was the regional health officer for Cook County and an administrative law judge. And I see that Yolanda Williams has joined us, so I want to welcome her, and maybe she'll have some questions as we move forward.
Representative Davis.
You know, I was lucky enough to fall into the health arena. I came to Chicago fresh out of college. Well, not totally fresh, but after helping my father plant his crop for the year, I came to Chicago. And I often tell young people that my first real job out of college with a degree, I chopped cotton for 30 cents an hour. It's been a long time ago. But that's what people where I lived did.
Mm-hmm.
That was essentially the only work that there was for most of the people. I mean, there may have been a few people who did something else, but there was nothing else to do. I visited with my cousin and classmate, and she was having her 65th wedding anniversary last weekend. And we had a wonderful time. Her brother graduated from our high school when we were sixth grade. Cora and I were 6 years behind Aubrey. Aubrey was the only graduate in his class. And we had to wait until he finished so that we could graduate. And he was the slowest person you've ever known. Fortunately, he's still alive. He's in his 90s and he's doing well. Although neither he or Cora's sister, one of them, was able to come to the festivities. One had fallen and broken their ankle, and the other was just ill. So I just came to Chicago, got a job, went to work, taught school, but falling into the health arena, I always say, was one of the best things that happened to me in Chicago, right at a time when social activism was the order of the day. New laws had been passed that created, they were called health rights laws. And that was the creation of a lot of health programs. It was the beginning of a real focus and a hard look at illnesses like sickle cell anemia, community health centers, community mental health centers, and the law mandated that local people be involved in some of this activity. They called it maximum feasible participation. And that's really how I got started working for Mount Sinai Hospital and working in the health arena as the director of training at the Martin Luther King Health Center. And here we are 50 years later with health still being, as Martin Luther King said, Dr. Martin Luther King said, of all the disparities and all of the programs and all of the things that were unequal and was a shame to society were the inequities in healthcare. And many people didn't know that Dr. King was that involved in the health arena. But it just made a lot of good sense. And here I am still thinking of all the issues in America right now. The two top issues on the minds of millions of its people is something called affordability, and that is the ability to live and have enough food on the table. And the lights don't go out while you're eating because you didn't pay the light bill, or the heat didn't go off because you didn't pay the gas bill. But affordability issue number one. Health accessibility and the availability of health care for people who need it is described as being number two in the minds of just millions of people in our country, according to the polling data, where people ask individuals what they think about this. So here we are. So Doug, Joe, Dr. Mason, thank you all so much, and let's go.
Great. So I thought I'd start tonight with a couple questions that were sent earlier in the month. And one of them is that there's a new bundled test in the emergency room. And you can get in, and with a single swab, they can test for COVID-19, RSV, influenza A, and influenza B. So I think of this test like a Swiss Army knife. When you go into the emergency room, you have many symptoms: cough, runny nose, congestion, sore throat, maybe something's going on in your chest. If we did each of these tests one by one, it might take several hours to a couple of days to get the diagnosis. And it's really pretty critical because each of these is treated differently. And you can pass this on to other people who could be extremely vulnerable to these illnesses. So somebody was very, very smart in developing a test that will do four things at once. So when you go into the emergency room and you have these symptoms, they're essentially saying, we as physicians, based on what we hear and what we see, and using our stethoscopes and our chest x-rays, can't make this diagnosis without new technological help. And someone figured out how to do 4 in 1 so we can arrive to the diagnosis quickly and make the right treatment decision as to what the next steps ought to be. So if you go in and this happens to you, it's really to everyone's advantage to do this test and to everyone's disadvantage not to do it if these are the symptoms that you have. Another question that came up was the changes we've seen out of HHS about vaccinations. And what they've done is originally there were 17 vaccinations that were recommended for infants and children, and they've now changed that to 11 vaccinations, with 6 of them being a shared decision between the physician and the patient's family. It's controversial. Many of the established medical groups think that those 17 that are recommended are done for sound, evidence-based reasons, and those who are not willing to continue that are doing it for something that is probably not as evidence-based. And Joseph, I wonder if you had some additional thoughts about that. Joseph, did you have any particular concerns about changes in vaccination schedule?
Well, I can't speak to that directly because I haven't looked at them, and I'm not a physician. Dr. Mason might have some comments about it, but what I know is I know that vaccines have been proven to be effective, and I also know that one of the challenges we're facing, we're having a significant outbreak of influenza, and the numbers are pretty high. Some people winding up in emergency rooms. But we've always had problems, not even problems, but consistently less than 50% of the population that are eligible for a flu shot get a flu shot. So that means that half the people that should get a flu shot don't get it, and it's probably closer to 60%. And so they're much more likely to get the flu. And as a result of that, give the flu to someone else. This is an infectious disease. If you get the flu, you're in a room, you cough, you sneeze, there are particles that go out, and they will make everything that anybody in that room, if you touch an area where someone is sneezing, that sputum goes all over the room, and then you touch your nose, your eyes, or your lips, then that's how the flu spreads. That's why they call it an infectious disease. So I can't speak to what they've done, but it's created a lot of confusion to people as to whether or not they should get a vaccine, and it's given some people that didn't think vaccines worked in the first place a reason not to get immunized against the flu. And so, while I can't speak to your specific topic, I can encourage people that if they haven't, it's probably not too late to get the shot. And the last thing that I'll say is from a public health perspective. If you get the flu, everyone you know and love is at risk of getting the flu. I mean, you probably need to wear a mask all the time until the symptoms disappear. But in the interim, if you get the flu, everybody you encounter potentially will get the flu as well. That's what we know from a public health standpoint.
And so I just want to kind of get back to this. The ones that they've made a shared decision are for rotavirus, which can be very, very severe in infants, cause a lot of diarrhea, dehydration, which isn't good for an infant. COVID-19, which could be fatal for an infant. Hepatitis A and hepatitis B, which is a problem should they need a transfusion. I mean, that's an issue. Another one is for meningococcus. Now, meningococcus is a kind of bacteria that can infect the lining of the brain. And that's a very, very serious problem. It can cause scarring in the brain, which leads to seizures and other developmental issues. So for me, it's unclear from a medical perspective why you wouldn't want to prevent these contagious and communicable diseases. So I can't particularly identify a scientific reason for taking these.
But you do know who is over Health and Human Services right now.
Yeah, I do, but I just want to
express that vaccine, so it's consistent with his program going in. So
that's true.
It makes sense from that standpoint, but it potentially undermines the health of the public. Yeah. And that's what most professionals in the field, both public health and medicine, will tell you. It puts the public at greater risk because now they no longer trust or have an excuse for not getting immunized.
I agree, but I just wanted to share that perspective or that thought that I was struggling to find any scientific or medical evidence as to why these should be taken off the mandatory list and put on the optional list and the risks of doing so.
Have we found anything that taking the vaccine or getting the flu shots that will do harm to people? So I guess what are the negative side effects that have been delineated or proven will happen sometimes as a result of people taking the vaccine?
So the answer is, in general, the processes for approval for these vaccines are so stringent that it's very, very rare for any of these vaccines to be approved if there's any significant potential for long-term and permanent injury. Sometimes there are reversible symptoms and reversible problems, but in general, the process leading up to approval is so long and challenging and difficult that it's very unlikely that you will receive harm from a vaccine unless there's an unusual set of circumstances like an allergy to one of the components of the vaccine. But I think they ask about that before they give you the vaccine. Are you allergic to certain things which might be components of the vaccine? But otherwise, allergic reactions tend to be short and not permanent. So the only thing that I can vaguely remember is some thought of irritation or inflammation of the heart from the COVID vaccine. But of course, that occurs with COVID too. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult to distinguish between what was from the vaccine and what was from the actual infection as well. All things considered, I think the evidence to accept a vaccine is very, very strong, and that the potential for harm is relatively small, almost negligible, from my experience. I can tell you that as a physician, you could not go into the hospital and see patients without an annual flu shot. and all of us got vaccinated for hepatitis. I can't recall a single of my colleagues having a problem with having vaccination in 30 years of practice. So that's the part I think is so striking is,
And in some institutions, yeah, and in some institutions, if you are in contact with patients, it's a requirement of employment.
yeah. So that's what I think is so
I mean-
unusual about not requiring a flu shot. It's just usual and customary procedure. We know that it saves lives. We know that it reduces the severity, the incidence of the infection. And as I said before, the vaccines are like seatbelts. You know, if you have the accident, you want to be wearing them. It will keep you from more serious injuries. And that's the question we ask, well, there are side effects from the vaccines. They are quite small compared to the damage from the actual illness itself.
Well, actually, since they're using live virus to actually develop the vaccine, it's likely if you get the shot that you may have flu-like symptoms, but you won't have the flu, and you'll recover shortly thereafter. But they do use live vaccine to create the vaccine, and so that's one thing that you could expect. You probably have, wherever they gave you the shot, if you ever had a shot, you'll have some pain in the arm or the area where you got the shot. But it's unlikely that anyone's going to have any, and it's rare that anybody have any severe adverse effects from getting a flu shot. And it's more likely that it will protect you, because what happens, it forces your body to produce immunity to some degree to the flu, and therefore you're less likely to get the flu. And if you get the flu, one of the potential things that could happen is it may be a simple case, but it could be a case that could cause respiratory problems that could lead to death.
So another way of answering your question, Representative, is that these vaccines have been around for decades. And if there would have been a problem with these vaccines in terms of serious injury, we would have uncovered it by now. It would be public knowledge. It would be in the medical literature. There'd be publications and discussions, and the vaccines manufacturers would have changed their composition. We may have speculation by the present head of HHS that certain components he doesn't like, and therefore he wants to make this voluntary. But disliking something and having the hard concrete evidence, I think, are two completely different sets of circumstances.
I would agree with you, Doug, with that. I really agree with you with what's being said. I'm very skeptical, given the leadership and their attitudes with public health and what have you, that they've made pretty clear. As a former public health official, and one responsible, and one that was around during these times of some of the bad ones that were bad actors. And I remember a lot of it when we were talking about that particular vaccine for that particular thing. And I agree that, and I was one that took every one of those vaccines. I was one because I believed in the fact that I did not want to actually become a vector for spreading these diseases, because I was not protected from them. So I volunteered like a lot of people, and I went to our CVS and I went to different places and since they made the vaccine available, to get it. And it's important, because other things that people forget is that people have sometimes underlying diseases like asthma or some sorts of other kinds of respiratory diseases that when you get a bad flu, let's say you got it because you didn't get the vaccine, it could create a very serious problem for you, one that perhaps could have been avoided. Now, are all the vaccines 100% without any issue? And I think Doug has spoken to that already. But it is important that the question be asked and answered, which I think we're attempting to do here.
Yeah, one of the things that Dr. Mason reminded me of, because I was an assistant commissioner during his tenure at the Chicago Department of Public Health, and that was during the time of H1N1. And we actually mobilized and set up vaccine clinics all over the city. I spent a lot of time going out into the community to promote vaccine and uptake of vaccine because people were scared. And particularly from a public health perspective, that we would, no one wants to repeat the ravages of I think, the 1918 Spanish flu,
Mhm.
when people died worldwide over something that is easily uh, controlled, one by vaccine, but some other simple measures. One of the things that I actually started to do, which I knew was good public health practice, and this is what during COVID, is every time I go out during COVID, and I wash my hands every time I go back in the house. Every time I go out and I come back in, the first thing I do is I wash my hands, because I don't know where I've been, what I've touched, particularly in the wintertime. And I've gotten in the habit of really being careful about my hands, because you could be in a place and touch a banister. You could be sitting down in a bar and touch the bar. You could go into a grocery store and someone had the flu, and you grab a door and touch the handle, and then you sneeze and you cover your mouth. Like, the likelihood is you're going to get the flu, and you wouldn't know how you got it or where it came from. So partly what my colleagues are saying, and I'm supporting, is vaccines. These vaccines have been proven safe and effective. The risks that you have are very low. But what I think is important for take away from this, if you get the flu, then you're a threat to everybody around you. You need to isolate, stay in the house until you're fully recovered, because you have the potential to spread the flu to everybody you know and encounter. And the last thing that I'm going to say, and it occurred to me that during the current president's first term in office, there was a term that one of his key people developed. And we hear and see a lot of that activity right now. There's this thing called alternative facts.
Mm.
I don't know what an alternative fact is. A fact is a fact. A fact is truth. You cannot have alternative facts. You can't come up with facts and call them facts just because you believe they're facts. They're probably a falsehood. And to this day, there's still statements coming out, even from the head of HHS, that is really not based on science. It's based on someone's opinion and maybe some written document they got, or maybe even a peer review document they got, that really is not legitimate.
Thank you, Joseph. Just want to say hello to Sandra Scout. Wishes everyone says hello. Audrey Cox says good evening, everyone. Melanie Balagan says good evening, everyone. So, welcome to Couch Conversations. I want to address another public health issue, a health equity issue that Representative Davis raised earlier. We've had lots of questions about colon cancer and about the new screening test for colon cancer. So I'd just like to begin with that new test and then kind of discuss the problems of colon cancer. Now, you've seen advertised on television this cute little box called Cologuard, and the postman delivers it to your door. You do something, and then you send it back, and you find out what are the results. This is a test that was a very, very sophisticated test that was developed to determine if there's any traces of blood in your bowel movements or any abnormal proteins that are associated with abnormal cells in the colon. And it's nice if you don't want to have the test done in your doctor's office. You're kind of concerned about the actual major test called colonoscopy, where they take a tube and actually go up and down your colon looking for problem spots and things that don't look normal. And if they don't look normal, they take pieces of them to look at later underneath the microscope. And so there are lots of people who are uncomfortable with both of these, and this is an alternative that was developed. It's not 100% perfect. It is only a screening test. And the problem with that is no screening test is as good as the gold standard. For instance, 13% of the tests that turn out to be positive are negative if you actually do the gold standard test of taking a lit camera and running the entire colon. The other problem is that it often misses abnormal growths in the colon. And these growths are called polyps and kind of look like the end of a piece of cauliflower or the end of a piece of broccoli. They're kind of growths from the very surface of the lining of the intestine that kind of grow into a tree-like structure and can kind of wiggle around. And these can be precancerous. And so that's why it's very important to have this test, to be able to look at them with this, what they call a colonoscope, and remove them if they can, and have them evaluated underneath the microscope. So it is a good test, but it's not a perfect test. So one of the reasons why there's such a concern about colon cancer is it is a very serious problem in the African American community. It's frequently underdiagnosed, and when it is underdiagnosed, it's discovered in its late stages and is more difficult to treat. Pardon? Yes, Dr. Mason?
No. You finished now. I'll say what I'll say after you're finished.
It has been occurring earlier and earlier in life, so they recommend that you begin screening at age 45. And again, this is one of those illnesses. It's better evaluated and treated before it becomes a problem, rather than diagnosing it when it has become a problem. The way that they test for it is to look for blood in the stool, but there are times where you may have symptoms before you can actually see the blood. And that is if you notice changes in your bowel habits, where you're going at different times more frequently, your bowel movements are smaller or different shapes, size, and colors than before. If it bothers you when you sit, if it hurts when you have a bowel movement on a regular basis, if you notice yourself becoming more and more tired and not related to sleep, or if you notice that you're losing weight and you're not trying to diet. It does require a physician visit and then a regular examination, and especially if there's a family history. There are certain illnesses that are also associated with inflammatory bowel diseases called Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, or if you have a family history of polyps. So let me stop there, Dr. Mason, and open up to what you had to say.
And I want to say I thank you for this part of the conversation, because I think it's very important. You know, in God we trust, all others must have data.
Yes.
And so the way I look at this, and I'm talking as a person, as a physician who followed the standards or the recommendations from the gastrological societies, and looking at that time, we were doing screening, and the screening we were doing then was colonoscopy, and there were some very discrete programs and recommendations that were scientifically based on having these screenings. And I took advantage of those opportunities to have those colonoscopies at the appropriate intervals. And usually if they were negative, you had a slightly longer distance. You could wait until you did the next one. And those were all approved by the Gastroenterological Society. And I had my last one when I turned 70. I'd had one almost every so many years up until that point in time. But here's the real thing we have to remember. We've been duped into thinking that there's always a symptom. In most of these kinds of cancers or problems, there are no symptoms, usually in the earliest, actually most curable, quote unquote, time. And that's why it's important. That's why the test was being done by actually cleaning out the colon and taking a scope with a light and a camera, looking all the way so you could actually see. That wasn't 100%, but it was very, very good in finding these early polyps. And so these early polyps, if not managed, could become larger tumors. And these colonic tumors could create a lot of problems for you. So it's important that you take advantage of the screening that's available, both to you and through your insurance company. and that you understand that the fact that I don't have a symptom means absolutely nothing. And so we have to stop, because usually you don't get a symptom of a disease until it's later in its development. So it's important that we take advantage of these, whether they be the screening tests that are available now, or if your doctor thinks that there's reason to believe that you need to have a standard colonoscopy, then have it. But don't guess, get the test so you know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, I want to pick up on what Dr. Mason was saying, and I had the opportunity to work with him and several other doctors during the course of my career. And one of the things he said I'm very familiar with, and we have a colleague, Dr. Paul Crawford. He's a nephrologist, and one of the things that he said, and it's a condition he said that our people, he's talking about black people, suffer from. He said it's the "I feel good" syndrome. I feel good syndrome. And people, you can't judge how healthy you are just because you feel good. As Dr. Mason pointed out, there is no symptom, early symptom for any disease. By the time a disease produces a symptom, you're at an advanced state of disease. And whatever they're going to have to do to hopefully get you through this is going to be more severe than if you had had it caught early. Since most people between the ages of, I'll say, 18, 50, 55, don't go to the doctor routinely, they don't get many of these tests. They don't get many of these screenings. So therefore, they have no idea, but they don't feel well. And when they do have a problem, they typically show up in the emergency room, and the emergency room is not going to catch anything. They may listen to you and talk to you about their symptoms, but they're going to discharge you because they can't find anything. So something as simple as, and it is complex, having a colonoscopy and having irregular intervals, which Dr. Mason said, reduces your risk of having cancer at an advanced stage. That's what he's talking about. If you wait, you'll get cancer at an advanced stage. And I see you getting ready to say something, Pastor Fields.
Yeah.
Let me.
If I can ask a
let me
question, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Can I finish?
oh, I'm
'Cause I was
sorry.
gonna
My apologies. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Because again, I'm on the board of Cook County Health, and we operate the largest Medicaid managed care program. And last year they were presenting data, and it was looking at the patient population we serve, and we have close to about 450,000 covered lives. So that's a significant number of lives. But there's a significant drop off in healthcare visits between the ages of 20 to 50 years old.
Yeah.
People stop going to the doctor, and they wait for something to happen to tell them that it's time to go to the doctor. A lot of people are not getting regular exams. They're not going to the doctor regularly. And then when something goes wrong, they either go to the emergency room or want the doctor to tell them what's going on. By that time, if it was cancer, you're probably at an advanced stage. And whatever the cure is going to be worse than the problem is. To some degree, you probably won't like it. But they may be able to do something. So one of the things I want to encourage is people need to be in some system of routine care and have a doctor that they trust, build a relationship with somebody. All the doctors I've had throughout my career in life as an adult have become my friends. And I can call them whenever I need to, and they will answer my call. But I'm going to throw it over to Pastor Fields because I know he's got something to say.
Yeah, sorry about that. I thought you were done. I have a question because I've had 2 or 3 colonoscopies, and I was just wondering, and maybe someone in the audience may have this question too. Sort of the science or the rationale, how does a doctor sort of determine? Like from my first time I had it, he says they saw something. We'll see you in 3 years, right? Then I went back, then they say I see you in 5 years, right? And so what is so like now I'm in that waiting period, but in this topic got me wondering, hey, you know what I mean? But what's the science, or is it just a doctor's judgment, or just knowing how it grows in terms of that time, right? Like I've had 3 years, and he said wait 5 years, and another time is another set of years. What goes into making those kind of determinations?
So that's really, it's based on scientific study.
Hmm.
They took a collection of patients, and some people got one test at one set of timing. Some people got a second set of tests at a different set of timings. It also depends upon what they saw, whether it was one, two, or three polyps, what the tissue was when they took it out and looked at it underneath the microscope, and where the distribution was. So they put all these things together, and it's interesting because you'll see the gastroenterologists and the epidemiologists will sit down and they'll have a panel discussion and they'll have votes on this. So it isn't one person deciding, but usually a committee of individuals looking at all the data together and actually deciding, is the data good data? Was the study conducted well, or was the study conducted outside the guidelines or outside the recommended structure of how they do things? And I think they also take into account some of the newer scientific developments in terms of, for instance, in the Black community, there are more problems with polyps on the right side of the colon than on the left side of the colon. So that's just structurally, it's very, very interesting. And also, the tissue that they get out of Black tumors doesn't seem to be as responsive to some of the treatments that might work on Caucasians. So I think they may take all of that into consideration. They said, well, if you're a Black person and we're able to get to the right side and we see polyps, then we might need to do this more frequently. Or if you had a colonoscopy and there are no polyps, we can be less concerned about you. Or if you've had a family history, or if you've had a history of radiation to the bowel, or are there other risk factors in your family, other malignancies? Have you been a smoker? Have you been exposed to bad chemicals? Do you have a diet that's high in highly processed foods? So they take all these things into consideration when they did that. And to me, I understand why you're concerned about that. I have a family history of colon cancer. And I was really shocked to learn that, well, no, these two have been clean. We can wait 10 years. You might think that might be a little bit nervous, but they said, no, this is what the studies show. So this is based on accumulation of data over time, which is one of the reasons why I think Dr. Mason and I feel so strongly about vaccines. The decisions to have these regimens are based on careful accumulation of information, analysis scientifically and mathematically of that data to reach these determinations.
Yeah, I want to speak from a personal perspective.
Yeah.
I'm now a prostate cancer survivor. I had prostate cancer. I was diagnosed as having prostate cancer last year, and I wasn't surprised. The reason I say I wasn't surprised, I was getting my annual visits. I see a doctor at least once a year, and I've been doing that since I've been in my mid-20s. And what happened is maybe a year and a half before I was diagnosed, my PSA, that's a blood test, simple blood test they use, because it stands for prostate specific antigen. There's this antigen that's produced in the prostate that has been a harbinger for the likelihood that you'll develop prostate cancer. It's not 100% accurate. So any man that has a physical exam annually will get this test. And as long as the test is below 4, the test results is below 4, they say you're safe and we don't have to do anything. Once it goes above 4, and there are ways to grade it, you have to feel that somebody's at risk. About several years before I actually was diagnosed with prostate cancer, I was always under 4, but then I went up to about 6. And then from 6, I went up to 8. And my urologist said, I think we need to do a biopsy. They did a scan, they did a biopsy, and they said that they found cancer in the biopsy. As a result of that, I had a series of radiation treatments. It's all outpatient. I drove to the hospital myself. I had my treatments. I would go home and go back again to get my radiation treatments. I am cancer free now. But if I hadn't been going to the doctor on a regular basis, there was this change notice in my PSA. He spoke to my urologist who said, let's do a biopsy. And they found that there was cancer in the biopsy. Then I was referred to a radiation oncologist to go through a series of radiation treatments. I am now cancer free. My PSA is below 4. If it goes up again, that might be some cause for alarm. But to also get back to this thing about Cologuard, I did the Cologuard test earlier this year because it's cheaper and less expensive than having a colonoscopy. And I was grateful to do the Cologuard, although I didn't like the process because I had to send my feces back, and there was a certain process you have to go through, and you have to send it back through the mail, but you don't have to touch anything. But the test came back and it was negative. That's the news you want to hear. But even if the news is not good, there's a chance. But if you never have the test, there ain't no chance. You ain't got no chance. By the time the cancer gets to a point where it does produce a symptom, you're in an advanced stage of cancer. And the thing about cancer, it's very specific. It's an uncontrolled growth of cells. Wherever it happens in the body, it's still cancer. It could be brain cancer, it could be throat cancer, but some is caused the cells in that area to start to grow uncontrollably. And they're feeding off your body, and they get bigger, and they can become massive. But if you don't get it detected some kind of way, you don't get it screened, and you don't get it taken care of, you're going to have not only physical problems before you die, because that's ultimately the only thing that's going to happen. But you will also probably experience some pain and discomfort and distress. And I see Nikki's come back, and she's come back maybe to corral us in, or to be mindful of the time that we spent talking.
Joe, just before we leave, I just wanted to add something to what you said real quickly. And
Dr. Mason, you guys have 14 more minutes, so you're not going anywhere.
Okay. What people need to understand is that somehow over time we've been sort of taught to think about the symptoms about this, the symptoms about that. Well, the truth of the matter is there's usually no symptom for any disease in its earliest, most curable stage. That's just the truth. And that's why these things are important to do, these screening. That's why they call them screening tests. And that's why you have a PSA. That's why you do a colon test or Cologuard or whatever you're going to do to see if there's something that indicates that there's a problem that you need to look at more deeply to determine whether or not there is something there. And the last thing I want to say is that, and emphasize, is just because you feel okay, don't mean you are okay. So a lot of these things don't have any symptoms, and we've talked about that. But I just wanted to do that. And reason, and I remember with each of my colonoscopies that I went to go get Dr. Hall, I never felt anything. Nothing was a problem. But I was getting it because it was on a schedule, and I wanted to be certain. And there's some other things we could talk about from a dietary point of view, because we eat a lot of processed foods. We eat a lot of things that contain things that we don't really know what they are, and some of these things that are used to keep certain foods around a longer period of time. That's a whole nother conversation, and Doug and others we'll talk about that another time. But there are things that we should, the message I want to leave here is don't go by how you feel. Don't guess, get the test. That's all I'm going to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Let's say hey to Connie Taylor, who is here. She says, good evening to everyone. Chief Valdemir Talley is here, and he says good evening also. Pastor Crystal Kyles is here. She tells me that she's looking for me. Well, Pastor Kyles, I'm going to give you a call. Her and her husband are great, great friends of our office, and she says hello to everyone just as well. Sandell Scott is here, and she says hello to everyone. Audrey Jaycox is here, and she says hello to everyone. Melanie is here, and she says good evening. Oh, good evening, Melanie. Also, we want to say hey to Alderman Pat Dow, who stopped in through Instagram and said hello, and also to President Commissioner Carrie Steele also, and to the guys in the garage. And we cannot forget our friends over at the Court Center. Hey, Court Center, how are you? Go right ahead, Joe.
Yeah, this is simple, and something that Dr. Mason said to me years ago. And you know that Dr. Mason also is on WVON every Sunday at 10 a.m. He is the doctor in the house, and he's the doctor in this house. And this is when WVON was actually at 3350 South Kedzie, and I was a guest on his program with him. And he turned and said something to me that I think is appropriate to share with you this evening. He turned and he looked at me, and he doesn't remember, he said, and every time I tell him he said it, he says, I don't remember that joke. He said, and these are his words, on your best day ever, you're sick enough to die. That's what we're talking about. You could feel great and be on the verge of dying because something is growing inside of you. Something is going on inside of you that you don't have any idea of. You know, there are people that have heart disease, and I'm taking some medicine for blood pressure and other things, and I've got what they call atrial fibrillation. I got to take something for that, which causes my heart to beat rapidly. But by the same token, you know, you could get up in the morning and feel dizzy and faint and fall out, and that's it. But it could be something that could be prevented if you had gone to the doctor and they had detected it, and you were getting treated for it. It would do two things. It would extend the length of your life, and it would probably improve the quality of your life as well. So again, I think part of our message is you need to do your part. There are two things, and we won't get into specifics of diet. You need to eat a healthy diet, and you need to be physically active, and you need to be in care with a doctor you trust and you could talk to.
Outstanding. Well, we want to say hey to LaShawn K. Ford, that state representative LaShawn K. Ford, who is here with us. Want to say hey to Jack Orloff. Hey, Jack, how are you? Thanks for stopping by and being here with us. Want to say hey to Dwayne Banks, who is here with us just as well. And also to Dr. Travis, who is here with us as well. And to Roy from Malcolm X College, who is here watching on YouTube. Hey, Roy Walker, how are you? How are you, Roy? Well, outstanding conversation. Joe's waving, hey, outstanding conversation. Well, Doug, go right ahead. Where are we in our conversation?
Well, I really appreciate what Dr. Mason and what Joseph have been saying, and I've been thinking that this reminds me of my cars. When I was working, I had 6 cars I put over 100,000 miles on them, and I was commuting at least 30 miles a day, bumper to bumper traffic. And so I had to make sure that those cars were in working order. And that meant that every time I had to take my car in for service, I took my car in for service. And every time I had to get my brakes checked, I had my brakes checked. So I did all those things so I could safely get back and forth to work every day. And I think that what Dr. Mason and Joseph Harrington are saying is, you know, these regular things that are scheduled are to help you keep your engine running, to help you operate safely in life, to get from here and there. And you want to know when your brake lining is getting thin before you can brake and have that accident. You know, you want to know if your fuel pump isn't working, to get that pump done before you have a problem and you can't get home. So what we're just talking about is just regular routine maintenance of your health, because it does require that, as Dr. Mason says, because by the time you have symptoms, it may be too late. It's much better to get that car in the shop and get it checked out and get the problem fixed before you have another major problem.
Outstanding. Want to say hey to Lieutenant Daniel Allen, that's retired Lieutenant Daniel Allen of the Chicago Police Department. And he sends a shout out to the congressman, and he says, 06. All right, want to say hey to Helen, who is here with us. Hey to Daryl Edwards, who is here with us just as well. Arlene Spencer is here. Hello to Mrs. Spencer. Want to say hi to you just as well. Want to say hey to Rosalind Turner. Hey, Roz. Roz is here with us too. Says, I'm watching and I'm watching every Monday. I don't miss Couch Conversations. To Jared Campbell, who is here with us. He says, great conversation. I wonder if the Cologuard really works. I think that I would rather use that than have the colonoscopy. Well, that's a conversation with your doctor, but I know that it may possibly work and help you out. So that's a great thing. Glad that you are here with us just as well. I want to say hey to Dean Nemi Award. That's Dean Nemi Award over at Malcolm X College, who is here with us just as well. Well, our time is getting near, and I know when you guys hate when I say that, but our time is near. So we're going to start our Until Next Monday. And we're going to start with Pastor Cy. Pastor Cy, what's your Until Next Monday?
Well, I would say until next Monday. First of all, thank you, Congressman and doctors, for such a great topic. Again, as the scripture says, it's very biblical that the Lord wants us to prosper and be in good health. And I would say until next Monday, especially at the beginning of the year, many of us make promises and resolutions. I would say until next Monday, make sure you keep your body moving. Keep your body moving, stay active, exercise. You made the promise on January 1. And so keep moving. If you keep moving, that'll help you reduce stress, keep off some extra weight. That'll help you in the health zone. So keep it moving. I say until next Monday, keep your body moving and keep moving toward better health.
Outstanding. Dr. Mason, your Until Next Monday.
I couldn't have said it better, Pastor. You nailed it. At the end of the day, we got to understand we got to take responsibility for us. Ain't nobody gonna do it. Ain't no cavalry coming to fix it. So if we want to get it did, we better get it done ourselves.
All right, did and done. All right. Joe, your Until Next Monday.
Well, I'm going to take a page out of Dr. Mason's book. He will remember it because it was created when he was the Commissioner of Health for the city of Chicago. And it's a simple formula he called 5 to Thrive. 5 to Thrive. It consists of these 5 things: drink more water, eat more fruits and veggies, exercise your body, mind, and spirit, be sexually responsible, avoid all addictive substances and behaviors. 5 simple things, like the 5 fingers on your hand, that everybody can do. And if you do those things, you'll live a long, healthy, and productive life.
Outstanding. Virginia Knight is here with us, and she says, thank you so very much, Congressman, for this informative conversation each and every Monday night. I don't miss it, and we have a whole group in our living room that watches just as well. To Dr. Mason, I know you are no longer the head of the Department of Health for the city, but I was just wondering, at one point in time, you came to the beauty salons teaching us about breast cancer awareness. I was wondering if there is something that we can do again similar to that. I tend to see that there's an uptake on breast cancer because there are so many women having the conversation without real information. At one point, you had a small demonstration piece. Who can I contact so we can help our fellow sisters survive this tragedy of a diagnosis such as breast cancer?
Yeah, and thank you. I was working with the National Black Leadership Initiative on cancer at that time. And we had a group of people, including a number of women that went out. I mean, some of them survivors, some of them not. But what I'll do, Nikki, is let me see if I can pull some of that together, because we did a thing called Stay Beautiful, Stay Alive. That was a program aimed at beauty shops for women, because you go and you want to get all dolled up and look nice, but we also want to make sure you're getting your mammogram and you're getting the things you need to get. So yes, Nikki, don't let me forget that. We'll see what we can do. But that was the National Black Leadership Initiative on Cancer. That was a program put up by Dr. David Satcher back a long time ago. So I think that's worthy to have a conversation about what we can do.
And
Definitely.
there are
And
a
I will
couple
not
of,
go ahead. Go
no,
ahead,
I was
Joe.
just going to say there are a couple of organizations I've worked with in the past that still exist. And these are organizations led by women, and their primary focus is breast cancer. And I'm happy to share that information with you.
Outstanding, and please do. And I will not let either one of you forget, because of course we always have a small part of that conversation in our Women's Heart Health Month, which is February. So get ready. Friday, February 6th is National Red Day, when the congressman usually has a conversation. We have a conversation. I know last year our conversation was at the Columbus Park Refectory. We will be having that conversation again about women's heart health. That's National Wear Red Day on Friday, February 6th. And hopefully we can have that information to share with you about breast cancer at the same time. Well, Doug, you're until next Monday.
Well, I'm going to go back to Pastor Field's question about why things are the way they are. Where do these recommendations come from? And I think that in this present administration, science has gotten a bad rap. I think that's unfortunate, because if we look at what happens when you study things and you look for knowledge and you look for truth, your purpose is to get a better outcome. And so when people talk about early detection of disease, it's to get a better outcome. It's to understand what causes things. It's to prevent it from happening. It's to get a better outcome. So I kind of like Dr. Mason says, in data we trust. It's how these decisions are best made.
Outstanding. Want to say hey to Dr. Elizabeth Lockhart, who is here with us just as well. Hey, Dr. Lockhart, I see you. I kind of missed you when I was rolling off all the names, but I can see you now. Thank you so very much. Well, Congressman, as always, take us home.
Well, this has been such an interesting and profound discussion. I actually have a brother. I have two brothers who are still alive, and one play brother that my father raised. And one of my brothers right now has colon cancer. And so for me, it was a real discussion. But I also was thinking over the weekend, we lost a number of octogenarians. I went to 3 funerals. Of course, one person was about 90 years old, Bishop Claude Porter from Maywood, Illinois, or operates PLCCA. And of course, the governor was there, the mayor of Chicago was there, all the politicians from Proviso were there. And of course, the bishop is an icon among those faith people who know of his work. And I think by the time I finished there, I got a call that woman named Lillian Drummond had passed away. Miss Drummond was 104. She too's an icon among community activists, and she lived in the Austin community and was the utilities chairman for the South Austin Coalition for Community Action. And then I went to another lady's funeral, Miss Tolbert, who was about 93, 94. And these individuals all, I think, took care of themselves quite well. Some had not been seriously ill, all of that. Miss Drummond was a couple of years ago. And of course, I went to visit her while she was in the hospital, and she was eating Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Mason. I hate, hate to say that, but she really was. But I think the point is that the better we look after ourselves, and that's why this information is so valuable and so important, because early screening and early detection, oftentimes, even as people's organs sometimes give away, they move out rather quickly and don't necessarily go through this long period of excruciating illness and pain and frustration and agony. And so I think knowing that the time will come when, of course, we will all leave, but some people leave in such a way that it's not as painful, nor as agonizing, nor as frustrating. So I thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for this discussion. And since a great deal of our focus is on public health, I'm going to invite State Representative LaShawn Ford to join us maybe next week and talk to some degree and answer questions about what the state of Illinois, what the government of our state is doing about public health. And so I note that he was with us, so perhaps he's hearing us. The rest of this week for us here in Washington, well, we got a lot of issues. The governor got a lot of problems to work on. The president decided to hold back a whole bunch of money. I'm talking about eons of money, more money than you can probably even count for early childhood education and programs for children. Of course, the courts have said that temporarily he can't do that, but that's a temporary decision that the courts have made. So we don't know. And people have been begging, and we're begging, trying to get the money released for the Chicago Transit Authority to extend services to South Suburban Cook County. That's also eons of money. I mean, more than you can count. So we'll see what the rest of the week holds. At least Monday started off good. I enjoyed it tremendously. The blues singers say they call it Stormy Monday. Tuesday's just as bad. That Wednesday's a little worse. And Thursday is also sad. But the eagle flies on a Friday. And Saturday I go out to play. And Sunday, Pastor Cy feels I go to church and kneel down on my knees and pray and say, Lord, have mercy on me. So I still say, Lord, have mercy on the United States of America. And I hope to see you next Monday. Thank you all.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
God bless. Blessings to your brother, Congressman.
Thank you. Okay.